I'm Carrie Milhouse. Nice to meet y'all. I'm a parishioner of Good Shepherd. I've been here, I think 8 years. Married for 20 years. I have 2 teenagers. That still sounds weird coming out of my mouth. And I work in private practice in Thomasville at Mosaic Psychological Services. So we're going to talk about media, digital media, and how to, parent in this age of digital media. Will y'all just tell me what age your children are so I know mostly who I'm talking to?
9, 7, and 3.
Okay, all right. And for you?
I have 28-year-olds and a 10-year-old.
Okay, so we're not into teens yet. Okay, all right. That I'll still talk about teens because you're going to be there before you know it. Trust me. But I'll keep that in mind as I do some of my talking. And I've got a note sheet I'll give you toward the end if you want it with just some of the points. But feel free to take notes. So just to be clear, digital media is everything from like television, radio, the e-books, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, computer time, phone time, all that stuff. It's just everywhere. It feels unavoidable. I was doing some research, of course, to feel confident backing up what I know to be true based on what I see with my children and what I see in my practice. I really work with 10 and up for the most part, occasionally a younger child, but I have a lot of teens. So that's really mostly where I work. However, these statistics surprised me. So the American Academy of Pediatrics is really focused on this, does a lot of good research, has a lot of good articles, and you should consider going to their site if you want more information. But the first thing, 3/4 of American teenagers say they have a smartphone, 25% of them say they're connected all the time, and 50% say they're addicted to their phone. Pretty scary right there. And we're talking about American children, just FYI. 76% of them go to, use at least one social media site. That's like a Facebook, Instagram, used to be, MySpace. I'm not sure that's too active anymore, but some interface like that. 76%. And most of them use more than one. So they're going to multiple sites like that. In my practice, most teens, and I always ask this during an intake, I ask them and I ask the parent, and sometimes I get pretty different answers. I usually go with the parent. How many hours a day do you think you are on your phone? 3 hours. 3 hours. 3 hours, yeah. Now, just a few years ago, we had stats showing that kids, an average teenager would text 100 times a day. I'm here to tell you that's much greater now, and even the article acknowledged it's probably much greater now because now we can do it through Kik and other apps, Messenger, not just, a text service. So, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of, lot of reduced communication. That's what I'm really fearing. I'll get to that in a minute. 4 out of 5 households have some kind of gaming console. So online gaming and video game time. It's pretty high, particularly with the boys. 84% of teenage boys play video games on a console or their cell phone. And one thing I want to make sure people know about that is the psychiatrists I work with say it's really important that when kids are on screen time, particularly video games, but even when you're doing papers and that sort of thing, every 15 minutes, good idea to look away. Give your eyes a 20, 30-second break because they're starting to see some concern in eye dysfunction and by being overstressed, overtired by so much screen viewing. So this one kills me. Out of all the statistics, I thought, no way. 97% of children under 4 use a mobile device daily. Can you imagine that? Does that even sound right? I know. You're looking like at it like, no way. But, I'll tell you, I had a family in last week, and they have I think she's about 7 months old, and the second she became agitated, mom gives her the phone. So that's what we're talking about. They don't have their own device. Parents are just like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Here you go. So wow, just starting them very young, pacifying them with technology like that. A lot of concerns. And finally, a majority of parents in a majority of studies say that their children ages 2 to 11 watch at least 2 hours of television a day. So that's gotten better, but we fear the reason that that number's gotten lower is because they're now on tablets and computers and YouTubes and, all that stuff through tablets and computers. So we're not sure that's necessarily great. So before we get into the what not to do, let's just acknowledge that there are some good things about social media and digital media, and I want to go over the benefits because I don't want anybody to hear me say, stay away from it, it's evil, don't touch it, don't let your kids use it, because that's not going to be a reality for them. It's going to put them back in this world if they don't have some way to understand it and know how to limit their time and all that good stuff. But first of all, one of the best uses is connecting with family and friends who don't live nearby. That Skyping and that ability to talk to grandma and see her while you talk to her, pretty cool stuff. So dad's on a business trip, mom's away on business, it's nice to have that connection. So that's a good thing. Of course, they have a lot more opportunity for exposure to new ideas and new information and other information than maybe they can get in their library or in their local news or whatever else. Now, that cuts both ways, right? Sometimes they get information here about things you'd rather them not, and you're not really ready to talk about, or they're not ready to comprehend, and it brings upset, it brings fear and things like that. So, of course, that goes both ways. Just an exposure to great awareness of current events and issues. I don't want to really talk about politics, but I will say one very interesting thing is how involved young people, high school kids, seemed to be so much more aware, certainly than I was when I was their age. I didn't know who was running for president, let alone what they cared about or why I should care. So to some extent, maybe that's good that they are kind of hearing and have the events and issues available to them younger. Social support groups are a really good thing for a lot of people, especially, for medical things. If you're a cancer survivor, you've got a child with autism or, things like that. A lot of people that can't get away from home or don't have access to a live group, can benefit from having opportunities using digital media to feel connected to others that have a similar experience. I do want you to be careful. There are some sites that are not healthy that have support groups. Like there's one called, I think it's called Pro-Mia, and there's one called Pro-Anna. And the Pro-Anna is how to be an anorexic, and the Pro-Mia is how to be a bulimic. Okay, if you don't know what those are, they're eating disorders that affect girls and boys, more likely girls. But they sort of normalize and give permission to engage in this behavior to look and feel better. Very dangerous. So you do have to be aware that some of the support groups are not the kind of thing you'd want to support in your children. Yeah, I know. Creepy. There's also an offer for a greater sense of social inclusion. Sometimes people feel very alone, adults, children, any age. I've seen it in every age, just a deep loneliness, a deep feeling that nobody gets where I am, they don't get what I'm going through, they don't understand my experiences, and they don't care. So I have some teens I see that have not been able to connect with a person face to face, but they have found a meaningful bond through somebody online. I'd rather that than no bond at all, and I try to use it as a platform to learn how to engage in a live friendship. But there are some people that their anxiety and their some of their other things they're carrying are so severe that may be their only outlet, at least for a while, till they get more help. So there's that. There's also a lot of great, things for promoting health, right? There's all these cool apps if you want to be in competition with your friends, your family, and do a weight loss thing, or who can walk more steps this week, or something like that. So there are kind of different ways to engage in positive, learning positive behaviors and establishing goals with people. So that's kind of a new thing that is easier to access these days. Also, there's some research that suggests that people that do have some access and time on digital media, particularly looking on computers on research sites and whatnot, is that they have a greater empathy for diversity and for greater just acknowledgement that all stereotypes are not true and that kind of thing. So it can kind of create a better social awareness and comfort. And finally, of course, in our schools, we're using this all the time. So there is an educational value. There are places where you can supplement your work. I have quite a few sites lined up for my kids that are struggling in math and science in particular. I've learned where some of those great sites are to reinforce what they're learning in school. It's crazy. Some classrooms aren't even using textbooks anymore, and I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. But this is why, I think you all are going to see it more than I've seen it. You're going to need to supplement your children's education by knowing where they can go to learn a little bit more. I'm finding in the high schools, a lot of times kids are being tested on things the teacher hasn't presented or isn't in the book. And their comment will be, well, you need to rely on more resources than me in your book. Wow, okay, if that's the way we're going to go, that's fine. Just tell me in advance, I can do that. But seriously, this is, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, this happens in the work world, and that's what school's kind of for, to prepare you for the work world. So anyway, these are just some. I'm sure you can think of a few more, but to me, those are like the biggest benefits of allowing the use and not teaching your kids that this is bad, stay away from it, and being overly strict about it, because there are some benefits. But the risks are why we're here, what I'm really concerned about. And I'm going to give you my little cheat sheet now, because as I talk about these, I've got some notes. So, do you know? There you go. Sure. So these, again, are some statistics about the research, what's been studied so far. And the first one, the one most widely studied, is obesity. And you can find a news story every day about how overweight we are as an American society, but particularly concerns in children, higher rates of diabetes and heart disease much earlier on, and even other problems, medical problems because of that. So they started studying this a while back when they were concerned, Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers and all that, and kids spending hours in front of the TV. And then when Atari and all the video games became very popular between the TV shows and the gaming, oh no, kids are sedentary for hours a day. But it's true. I mean, it's true that when you move to activities where you don't burn 1 calorie, instead of being outside climbing trees and chasing butterflies, this happens. So that's what they say, that when kids watch between 1 to 3 hours of TV, and you can substitute gaming, whatever, sedentary activity like that, there's a 10 to 27% increase in obesity in those children. So now there are multiple studies. I just cited one here. But basically, the American Academy of Pediatrics right now, I said, recommends no more than 2 hours of screen time stuff a day. So that's computer, TV, video gaming. But there's other studies that they're starting to look at that say even 1.5 hours actually is probably a better gauge of what you want. So it still is a concern. Maybe not as much about the TV as it is about sitting with the computer or tablet, okay? Sleep disorders and disruption, huge, huge, huge. Okay, I've got to talk about teens because I know them best. They run about a 12-hour sleep deficit every week. That means they miss 12 hours of sleep that they should get because they're going to bed too late, getting up too early. Their sleep is interrupted sometimes too. Why is this? Because they're not putting their phone away, because they're, and at any time. They might not be putting it away earlier in the day, so they're up really, really late catching up on homework. Or maybe they do their homework and then they just can't, disconnect. Getting up early because they didn't finish their homework. They fell asleep with their phone in their hand. So these things happen. But there's a lot of research that says keeping a phone in a bed at night, in your bedroom, for adults too, by the way, for you all too. If you do that, your chance of having some kind of sleep disorder, like not official disorder, but disorder in your sleep, let me say it that way so I don't confuse it, you might have a harder time getting to sleep when you want, staying asleep, and getting the quality sleep you want. So it's true for adolescents and adults. Also, just having the computer in the room, any of those things. Truthfully, I take my children's phones. I've got a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old. My son's time, my 14-year-old is 9:30. My daughter's time is 10. Done. Computers, I just allowed my daughter to have a laptop in her room. But the rule is when you're on the computer, the door stays open. My daughter, you've got to look at your children, because I couldn't do that with my son right now. He's just not as disciplined. He's not as focused. My daughter, pretty much a straight A student, very, that's very important to her. And I trust her that when she's on the computer, that's what she's doing. My son, when he's on the computer, he's using it for entertainment. He really is. He's playing Minecraft or he's YouTubing a Hawaii 5-0 or some kind of show. So that's the difference. And we'll talk about that later too as the recommendation. When you decide how much time your family should allow of social media and digital media, you also want to think about what they're doing with it. Okay, because if it's purely entertainment, the limits are a little different than if they need it for research, if they are connecting with grandma, if what are they doing with it? So we've got to talk about that. But sleep is huge. Okay, when we don't sleep well, we don't think well. Our memory is affected. Our academic performance, our work performance, our social relationships can be affected. It's just huge. We don't want to lose our sleep for anything. This next one's a big deal to me. Decreased interest in real-life relationships. Okay, how many times have you been to a restaurant and you've observed people at the table and everybody is just looking at their phone and not speaking to one another? Have you ever been to a restaurant lately where you haven't seen that at least at one table? I haven't. I see it at most tables, and it's disturbing. It's disturbing when people are choosing to attend to somebody who's not in front of them. You may have heard Father Tom say this. I've heard him say it multiple times. But the person who's in front of you at the moment is the most important person right then. That's what relationship is about, attending to the person in front of you. I see people spend hours on social media and they're connecting. Here's the distinction. They're connecting, they're not communicating. Okay, and what I mean by that is they're looking through, they're reading, about what somebody's doing or looking at the pictures and making inferences, but they're not having a conversation. Okay, and that's, there's a lot of predictions about that I'm going to talk a lot more about in the third week of this series, which is talking more about when you think your child is having problems with depression or anxiety or some other thing that needs attention from a counselor or even a psychological testing, how to know when this is just sort of normal moodiness, maybe normal developmental stage stuff, and when it crosses the line and you need help, and your child needs help. So we're going to talk about how that looks and how that's distinguished too. But the other thing kids don't understand, and it's because of lack of experience and, frankly, their development, brain development, where they're at, okay, based on what naturally happens as our brain develops. They don't understand that those relationships online don't have the same value as a relationship in front of you. And it's so easy to perfectionize a person who's online, who's virtual, I'll call them, even though they're a real person, you hope. Talk about that too, but it's so easy to characterize somebody as more perfect and more all the good things that you see when you have that limited exposure to them versus a person that you're interacting with on a regular basis. It's easier to see the real person. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm saying? Okay, so kids don't really have the capacity to know that, to understand that. And so it really does worry me when I see somebody who's only ever social with just an online friend. Really does. And especially if a child has other situations like homeschooling where they're not in a homeschooling group or not ever out of the house or not ever among peers. It's not a knock on homeschooling. I don't have a problem with that. Just there are certain kids that if they are isolated the whole time and never around other young people, they really struggle with being comfortable in social settings. So, okay, so where are we at? We are at, exposure. Inaccurate and unverified information. This is where you all need to step up your game and be aware of where are your kids researching, where are they getting their information, how do you teach them what's safe and what's reliable and what's not. And you have to do that. You have to put time in. You have to sit with them. And schools give some advice, like they're not fans of Wikipedia, right? They'll tell the kids you can't use that site. Wow, but a lot of teachers do. So find out what's reliable, and and help them learn when something is based on a person's opinion, and when there's fact. Okay, they need to know how to do that, and you need to be really involved in where they're looking and helping guide and inform that from the start, from right now, even the 3-year-old. Really. Exposure to risky behavior. There's a lot of research there, too, that when kids see things, they begin to normalize them and see them as acceptable, okay? So for me, I can't tell you how many shows I've nixed. My daughter will go in and she'll be like, can I watch this show? I said, I don't know, let me read about it. And I go and I try and research the show. I remember one of the first ones, she wanted to watch Grey's Anatomy, and I said, no, absolutely not. Why can't my friend? I said, well, I'm going to hear that the rest of my life, and you're going to hear this the rest of your life. I am not a parent to your friends. I'm your parent, and I really just care about you. And you can't watch this. So there's just, too many adult themes in that show for the time she was 15. The Walking Dead, absolutely not. I don't agree with the theme. I think it's, morbid, and I don't want you watching that. So I have to, I'm very particular. Movies, the same thing. I read the Catholic reviews. I decide based on that how I'm going to go with it. Even song lyrics. I might be the only parent in the world that does this, but when my kids want to download music, I make them find the lyrics of the song and bring those to me, and I read them. And I say, huh. My daughter wanted this song once, kind of funny story. She's like, Mom, this is such a cool song. And one of the lyrical lines in there was about, come wet my whistle. Any ideas what that might be referring to, adults in the room? Yeah, guess what? My daughter had no clue. So I just sat there and explained it to her. I said, let me just tell you what you just sang, because she's here, singing along. She's like, no. And I'm like, yeah, that's what that's talking about. She's like, okay. And that was the end of that conversation. But I'm like, honey, yeah, this is why I read the lyrics, because I want to know what you're being exposed to, because it normalizes behavior. And what you find is that kids that do see certain things become more likely to experiment with them and try them. You see it with drug use, you see it with sexual behavior, with eating disorders, with cutting, with self-harm behaviors. This is how these kids learn about this. Oh, that took your pain away? Huh, I'll try that. Oh, marijuana's legal in half the states now? Okay, it can't be that bad. So when they see these behaviors on YouTube videos, on blogs, people talking about them and things like that, it sort of makes it feel okay. And you're just old-fashioned if you think that's not good. I can't even tell you how many conversations my daughter has come home and started about drug use, And she's like, don't worry, Mom, I'm not planning on doing it. I just want to understand, because, I know a lot of people that do. And I want to understand, are you sure it's really bad, Mom? What's really funny is when she comes home and she uses different terms for the same drug. And she doesn't know that, yeah, cannabis is marijuana. Yeah. Oh. So it's just crazy. They're just exposed to this. And the older they get, the more you're going to come up against that. Okay, so back to my list. Cyberbullying. Wow. That what's really scary about this is it has kind of all of the same dangers and risks as live bullying, if you will, in vivo bullying, but it's got more. Okay, the first thing is a lot of times the bully can be anonymous, so you don't even know who you're fighting, right? You don't even know where this is coming from. You can't figure out why, who, whatever. The second thing is there's no break from it. There's no safe haven. It's not like it only happens when you're at school. It's whenever you pick up that digital media and look at your Facebook and you see here this is, or you see you see a string of conversations and somebody's been talking about this, or and it spreads really quickly, right? Instead of just a few people in your classroom knowing that you're always being messed with by this person, your whole school knows, your community knows, people go to your church in a different school, they're talking about it. There's just no relief. So it's really scary. It's really toxic. I promise you cannot go a week without finding an article about somebody who's killed themselves over being bullied, and a lot of it's now cyberbullying. We just saw an article last week, right, about a teenager that killed herself in front of her parents, being bullied about her weight, right in front of them. It's horrific, and it's really, you have to you have to open up the lines of communication so children can share with you and feel comfortable sharing with you. A lot of times it'll come first like, oh, Mom, my friend Sally, da-da-da-da-da. And it gives you a great opportunity to give them, support in that, but then say, let's talk about if that happened to you. How would you handle that? How would you know what to do? What do you think you'd say? Who do you think you'd tell? Go through that with them, role play it with them, expect that it may happen. Again, my daughter had a really bad experience in middle school where we had to involve the the resource officer, because it was not just cyberbullying, it was happening at school, and then there was anonymous, people make fake accounts, right? And then they try and attack and say things and get on your list, your friend list or whatever. They connect with your friends and then put stuff. They get accepted by your friends, and it's really bad. It's really easy to do. It's easy to create something fake, and a lot of parents aren't checking. They're not looking. I totally recommend you look. There is a difference between, and there are some apps, there's some technology out there, right, where you can actually see every single thing your child sends and every single thing they get. I personally don't go that far, but again, I'm looking at my kids, and I know I feel pretty confident that I don't have to look at every single thing. I randomly take their phones, and they know at any time I can look and just check out stuff, and I do. I look at the Instagram stuff. I have rules about who they follow. If you don't literally know the person, you've met them and you can introduce them to me, you don't get to follow them and they don't get to follow you. That's just how I feel. That's just how I want it to be. As they get older, as my daughter enters college, that can change. But right now, she's learning boundaries, and she's learning how to filter, and she's learning how to discern who and what is safe. I'm going to take a little bit of control there and help guide that so that she can start to learn it on her own. So anyway, that's really, it's really one of the things that scares me a lot, is just how much of that's going on, and how unfiltered our kids feel. Some of the things they'd say, some of the comments, some of the responses, they would never ever say that in real life. But there's this unrealistic courage, I guess. I'm not sure that's the word I want to use, but they just don't feel the same inhibitions or the same need to filter when they're not face to face, or even in a conversation ear to ear. It's just, it feels safer and more anonymous when they do it online, and it's simply not. They don't get that. They don't get that. Decreased academic performance. Most parents are worried about this, and they should be. Here's something interesting. I said to you earlier that 71%, or maybe I didn't, 71% of kids 13 to 17 are on Facebook. I've got a study right back there on my desk talking about how just one visit to Facebook a day predicts lower grades. Yeah, one visit a day. Doesn't matter if you do it one time or 15 times, the article said. And here's the problem, I think. What they did is they had kids sit and study for 15 minutes, and they said every time you get distracted or stop your focus on studying, document that. Just mark how long you were disengaged. How many minutes out of 15 do you think kids were distracted in that little study block? Any guess? A little bit more. Yeah, they only, I don't want to say it backwards. Let me just, hold on, let me check my cheat sheet here. I lost my place. 9 minutes of studying, so yeah, 6 minutes they were distracted. And the majority of the time, 55%, when they pulled away, it was for social media. Okay, so when you study with your phone next to you, or with your computer on, waiting for your friends to come on and join the game, and those things are alive and well, every time when you hear the bing or the boop or the sound or whatever, the buzz, guess what? Going right to that. And guess what? That doesn't work. Your brain, your memory doesn't work that way. They, on average, only studied 4 minutes before becoming distracted. That's no way to remember material and be prepared at all. So if you're letting your kids have their access to media while they're studying, about the only thing I can say that might be useful is music without lyrics. That's it. Sometimes because that drowns out other noises, and it keeps distractions kind of in the background. Other than that, I don't see use for any kind of, unless you're using it for research and that's your homework, you have to research this topic, or you're, writing a paper or something maybe. But other than that, it's just not going to help them. It's not going to help them. They're not going to be able to be disciplined enough to not respond to that noise. Okay. And if you think about it, how good are you at that? I want you to think about that, because that's going to be my number one recommendation, is be curious about what you're modeling to your children about your use of digital media. So we'll talk more about that. But okay, privacy concerns. Got to get into that as a risk. How am I doing, Rose? Thank you. Okay, good. I'm halfway through. That's good. Privacy concerns. Who can view your information? What you post, how long does it stay accessible? If you delete it, can it be retrieved? All these things kids aren't sure about. They think if they send a Snapchat, right? People love the Snapchat. Do you know what Snapchat is? Do y'all know what Snapchat is? Okay, very good. Yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a real fan of Snapchat because the images come and go that quickly, and you can be exposed to very disturbing things, and it is traceable, though. It's not always easy to do, but it can be done. But a lot of kids think, oh, I'm not going to get caught with this because. But kids are getting more savvy, and you should teach your child how to do a quick screenshot. So if they do get something disturbing, they have proof that somebody sent something that was completely inappropriate. But the biggest thing is learn what the privacy settings are on all your technology, your TVs, your computers, the phones, the tablets, etc. Learn what they are, learn how to activate them, teach your child about it. Tell them what you're doing, and if they do if something creeps through, make them comfortable telling you about that and asking, hey, this is what came up when I, Googled this, and I didn't want that. Just make that comfortable. But they just don't know much about how to, even when they know the privacy settings, especially teenagers, they don't employ them often. So we need to make sure those things are on and kept on, and that they don't get smarter than we are. That's the hardest thing, that they don't get ahead of us in the technology. And I got to be honest, I'm not real, I should have said this at the beginning, I'm not very technology savvy. I depend more on my husband for that. But I do not have a Facebook account. I don't have an Instagram. I never have. Don't think I ever will. And when I forgot my phone today, I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. I didn't panic. I didn't say, oh my God, There are times I have, if I knew I was going to be here all day, I'd probably be a bit more antsy, But 3 hours, okay, it's all good. Must have been a reason. I didn't need that phone right now. So that's my attitude. Mental health decline, I'm not going to touch on much right now because that's really what the third series of this seminar is. Next week, there's going to be a bigger focus on safety, specifically how to avoid being a victim of a predator, how to know when maybe you're being engaged or your child is being engaged by one. I won't be talking next week. I'll be here, but I recruited a friend in law enforcement who's going to do at least one case study and be very real with you and take you through how this happens. And maybe give some ideas about ways you can protect from it and different technologies out there to help you make sure that this isn't happening. And in the third week, I'm again going to talk more about mental illnesses that can arise from too much use of this or can be exacerbated if you already have that propensity or kind of already in that camp, how they can be exacerbated by the wrong type or too much of this digital media use. So I'm not going to talk too much about those. The safety one, I will say, of course, sexting is a big problem. I actually do know kids who have done that, who have agreed to send pictures of themselves. I know I work with some people who have had sexual encounters posted on a social media site for people to see. Devastating, absolutely devastating. Just one scenario, she came in, she said, well, that's it, I'm done with boys. They just hurt me. I think I'll try girls now. Bam. Wow. That kind of reaction to that, having that that experience. So it cuts really deep. Also driving, driving and texting again, please, what are you modeling? I had to really zone in on that. I had to really, and I'm on my husband a lot. That's actually one of the things I'm better at than he is. If I really need to text while I'm driving, I will hand my phone to whoever's in the car and let them do it. And if there's nobody in the car, I really, really just try to not decide that I need to do that. Of course, you can use the voice activation, but there's not even, that's not even great because you still have to check and make sure it's done right, and it's still a huge distraction. What they found is in 2014 and 15, 8.8%, almost 9% of car accidents were due to distracted driving, which has been defined in this particular study as, using your phone, whether it was talking or texting or something like that. My daughter currently babysits right now for a family who lost their 19-year-old son because somebody was texting and plowed right into him and his motorcycle as he was stopped at a red light. Gone. So it's very serious. And, we all learned to drive without the distraction of a phone. So we got our skills down. We got very confident. Our kids are thinking, just when they do see us sometimes use it as we're driving, that they can do that too. And they don't understand that we didn't have things when we were learning to drive, and so we're at a different place in our driving ability. So it's just really scary. And I tell them, when my daughter's driving, I try not to text her or call her at all because I don't want her. She knows she better respond to me. That's another rule, by the way. If mom calls or texts, you better, if you've got about a 15-minute window if you want to keep that phone. Period. So anyway, that's something I'm pretty concerned about is the driving behaviors. Okay, so what are your strategies? Given all this information, what can you do? And I gotta grab one of my articles because it's got some really particular recommendations for children your age that I'm just really going to read right off of here. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, you can go to a site. I put it on your paper, and I highly recommend you do it. The site for creating a social media plan for your family. I went through it myself, and what it does is it helps you identify rules that you're going to go by, that you're going to agree to model, and you're going to hold your kids accountable to. And it's things like, where do we get to use social media? For me, at our dinner table, you cannot bring your phone to the table. If you bring your phone, I don't even like you to bring your phone. Sometimes I allow it if it's face down and turned off. But even then, I'm just like, it really doesn't belong at our table. And I've even kind of morphed that now to, it just doesn't belong at the table. I don't care what meal we're having. But it started with never at dinner. And I am one of those families that I pretty much insist on dinner together, and not just a couple of nights a week. We do it just about every night a week. Every once in a while, they know it's a treat if I say, okay, we can sit on the couch in front of the TV and eat this pizza. But it's rare. I mean, we sit around the table. And what I get a lot now is, I'm just not hungry, My son eats almost any time of the day, but sometimes at dinner he's eaten so much the rest of the day that, and I'm like, that's okay. You still need to sit with us because dinner is more than just food. It's conversation. It's checking in. It's touching base. So the kids know, just because you're not hungry is no excuse not to be at the dinner table, and we just eat together. But there are no phones. There's no TV on. I'm sorry if there's a great football game on. Oh, well, no. Because you know what? It takes away from you paying attention to the person in front of you, across from you, and beside you. It just does. You're distracted by that. You're not giving your attention. And let's face it, how many minutes do you spend like that across from your loved one in a day where all you're doing is focusing on them? How many minutes? Probably not a whole lot. And guess what? As your kids get older, don't expect any more. Expect less. So I insist. I absolutely insist on it. I do not allow, here's another one. So where else may you not allow it? I don't know. You may tell them they can't ever use social media in their bedroom. That's up to you. You've got to decide that. I do let my kids do that in their bedrooms, but the doors are open. so that they know at any moment I might walk by, and if I see something or hear something I don't like, and many times I hear things I don't like when my son's playing Minecraft with some of his friends. I'm like, whoa, okay, if we're going to use that language, and I don't care, the kid can hear me. My son's a little embarrassed. I'm like, I don't care what he hears. Like, hey, it doesn't sound like you guys are having a good time. Doesn't sound like you're talking nice to each other, so it's time for this to be done. Boom. So we have open doors. So where is social media allowed? When is it allowed? Okay, again, is there a bedtime? One thing I forgot to mention, but I think I put on your sheet, is once again, there are strong recommendations from doctors, American Academy of Pediatrics, that you discontinue any use of digital media that involves a blue light background. That's almost everything, guys. That's phones, tablets, TVs, all that. 1 hour before bedtime. And there's a lot of research on this, because that blue light, for some reason, it triggers the brain to not release melatonin. Melatonin is a natural chemical in our body that produces sleep. It tells the body, okay, it's okay to shut down, it's okay to rest. So that's the biggest reason for not doing it. And if you question this, Apple just about, I don't know, I think it was 9 months ago or so, came out with an app, a nighttime app, to try and counteract that. So they took it really seriously. They heard the research that, hey, this is causing sleep problems for people, And let's face it, I mean, many of us, that's how we end our night, right? We look at our phone one last time, right? That's what we do, but that's not what we should do. And I've been really, personally, myself, working on, Kindles are safe, by the way. No blue light. But so pay attention to that. But more than that, the other reason to avoid this is because a lot of times people I see, adults and adolescents, the sleep is caused by racing thoughts. The ability to sleep is compromised by these worry thoughts, these racing thoughts, these unwanted thoughts. Where are some of these coming from? Where they're coming from viewing all this social media and seeing what you missed out on, what others are doing, how much better somebody else's life is, or for adults, what 6 emails came in about work that you're going to have to deal with first thing in the morning, crap like that. And you know what? You're responsible for choosing to view that. And your children are responsible for choosing to let that be what they look at before they go to bed. Why are we doing that? Why do we want to do that? Leave work at work, look at work stuff when you're at work. Don't look at it right before you go to bed. Don't look at it right before dinner, so you're spinning about that stuff instead of being attentive and present to your family. Why are we doing that? Why are we agreeing to being so accessible? I don't know why, but it's not healthy. And we do have that choice. And we need to teach our children, when something is causing more harm than good, you need to cut it off. I have, believe it or not, I've been successful with a few of my teens in them coming to the idea that they're just getting off social media completely. And the ones who have done that are so much happier. They're not worried they're missing out. They feel a great freedom. They're not as depressed, less medication. Boom, boom, boom. For some people who cannot be disciplined enough to know when to put it down, or to not be so taken in by when they're not invited, when things go on without them, or it's not a good idea. And we've got to know when this is hurting us and why keep doing it. It's like I tell the kids, I try and give them physical examples because they get that sometimes better. And I say, it's like this: you can eat at McDonald's every day, and you're going to survive, you're going to live. But what do you think is going to happen if you choose to only eat your meals every day? You're going to McDonald's for your meals. It's like, I'm going to get fat. I'm like, probably. You're probably going to have some weight problems, probably some cholesterol, salt problems too. I said, but you'll be here, right? You'll be around. Yeah. I said, but are you going to feel good? No, probably not. I said, yeah. That's the same with social media stuff. If you go there every day, all the time, and that's what you do with all your free time, that's where you're centered. If you're not feeling good, if it's making you sick, why are you continuing to do it? So we have to help our kids, with that. By this plan helps you establish when you get to use social media, where you get to use it, how much you get to use it, and when you stop using it. So it's a great plan. You should think through your own habits first, okay? Because your children will challenge you if you bring your phone to the table. Well, why does Dad get to use his phone? You have to agree to that before you implement it, you have to agree that you're going to cut it off too. And honestly, I can't think of too many jobs where if you delayed answering your phone or a text or something else by 15 minutes, the world would truly be impacted, or your life or your job would be threatened. I really can't. And, you know, my husband has one of those jobs where he is expected to be available 24/7, and even him, I've had to say, too bad, let him fire you. You've got 21 years in, don't think it's going to happen. But seriously, don't bring your phone to the table. Like, I'm just done with it. So it can be tension sometimes, but he's pretty much agreed to it. Because the truth is, it's not going to matter. 15 minutes isn't going to matter. 5 hours might matter. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, not going to matter. And if they do challenge you, I challenge you to respond to that with love and with the attitude of, okay, you caught me. You're right. Instead of, don't you give me that attitude. When you have a job, you can do what you want to do. Try not to, be defensive. But hear them, because they are watching you. They're watching everything you do. They're looking at how much TV you watch, what kind of TV you watch, what kinds of, how much time you're on a tablet, where you use your phone. If you're willing to stop a conversation with them to answer your phone and talk to somebody else, they are paying attention to all this stuff. And it's hard. Sometimes I get called on it when I'm not in the mood to be called on it. And I try to listen to my own words and respond right. The other thing that's really important is when they are using social media, again, what they're doing is important. So you can say 1 hour of social media for entertainment. That means you have 1 hour to look at Instagram posts and make your own. Okay, if that's what your child's doing, or you have 1 hour to video game and that's it. But maybe their total use time is 2 hours because they're going to need a computer to do some homework, maybe they like to type their notes, or they're going to Skype with a friend that you moved a couple years ago and they still have a best friend in another state, or grandma or something like that. Or are they doing educational stuff? Are they going to Khan Academy? Are they going to Algebra Nation? Are they, doing bedtime math? Are they doing one of those things where they're really just trying to shore up? And I will say the research points to when kids do high quality educational apps, they are likely to get something out of that, to be able to learn, but they're even more likely when you're there with them. Instead of saying, oh, just go check Khan Academy, they've got good videos, go do that. I got to sit with my son and say, okay, let's look at this together and let's talk through it. And it's still, that solidifies things better, they learn it better, and they engage better when you're involved. Not necessarily good news. I know a lot of parents like, oh, I'm already so busy, I've already got so much, and I can't, that means I'm not going to get my time to go check my Facebook if I'm sitting here. But it's the reality of what they need if they're going to excel and get out of it what it's meant to produce, the educational site. So that's this little bulletin from the American Academy of Pediatrics, that it's a high quality program and co-viewing it that really seems to produce the best results in kids. What else? So that's it. I want you to look at that media time. I wanted to point out, remember when I said, having that phone when they're studying, or like I said at the dinner table, or other times, there's also research on how we respond every time we hear that beep or buzz or sound or music, whatever it is. And we have almost like that hyper arousal, heart rate increases, the skin test, where they, that registers, so they find significant like physical responses to that, much like, addiction. Right? Seriously, much like addiction, like, oh, and that sense, oh, I got to check that. Wonder if that's important. Be curious one day. See how many times you interrupt what you're doing because you hear a beep or buzz or sound or whatever. See how many times you're willing to stop what you're focused on to go see how important that is. I think you'd be surprised. I was surprised. I was like, oh, okay. So try to follow these recommendations yourself. I would, before you lay down the law with the kids, I'd work on some of this, make sure you're kind of in line with it, you're comfortable with it, and then make your plan, based on that. Some other things for younger kids is that the recommendations here from, again, American Academy of Pediatrics is do not, I've already said this, but to discourage any social media or any digital media use while they're studying, preparing for school, unless it's required for that. Don't don't try and soothe kids with that. Like if they're really upset or really emotional or really agitated, don't try and use one of these devices as a calming agent. This is particularly for the young 3-year-old. And make sure you have media-free zones in your home, or at least time periods, things like that. And to make sure you have a consistent use policy. This is what we're going to agree to. And it's not fun. I promise you, it's not fun. My daughter still argues most nights about why she needs that phone a little bit longer. And I'm like, you know what? You got home at 2:15. I said, I think 10 is more than generous. Don't make me back it down. Out on the weekends, I give a little bit more flexibility, but she does probably spend 2+ hours a night on homework, and she babysits 2 hours, 4 days a week. So really, when I think about it, 4 hours is already accounted for doing something else. So it's not a ton of use. And I actually don't have a restriction on how much time. I have more of a restriction on when you get to use it and when you don't, and when we're done for the night. Yes?
No, this is great about your own house, but what
Yep.
about other people's houses? I feel like I can control inside my own house, but
Yes.
they go down the street to their friends' houses. So
Yes.
what are the rules about that?
Yes, well, you have to communicate with those parents, right? And I mean, it can be a little awkward, but if you really don't want your child to have, be on their phone and stuff past a certain time, your child either leaves that device with you, or you get a confirmation from that parent that they will hold that device at that time. Now, does that mean they can use their friend's device? Absolutely. And guess what? We can't control that. When they go to school, when they get older, they can always use somebody else's device to send stuff and find stuff. And, the only way, a lot of times they'll log on to their account with somebody else's phone. There are ways to track that. There are apps you can buy, there are services you can buy, again, if you want to see, even if they use somebody else's device, if they're using their own account. What gets scary is when your kids give their account information to a friend to do something for them. One of the popular things now, have you heard of what a streak is? You guys know what a streak is? Oh, good, yeah. A streak is how many times you and I go back and forth. I send you a Snapchat, you send me one. Then I send you one, then you send me one. A streak is how many days we keep that going. My niece came for Thanksgiving from Virginia. She's 15. She's like, yeah, I got 5 streaks going right now. I'm on 98 days with one of them. Yeah, but my brother also told me she sends, and I looked at my brother, I said, what are you thinking, man? 600 texts a day. 600. Crazy. I don't allow that. Now, my brother, what he does is he just cuts off the Wi-Fi in his house to all the things he does. He cuts it off. I think he told me 9 o'clock, 9:30, something like that. So that's how he started to respond to that. It's like, okay, no more of this. But you cannot always, the answer is you can't. You've got to communicate with other parents and say, by the way, this is something that concerns me. Are you willing to keep an eye on this? I'd really not like my daughter or son to be able to do this after this time. And if they don't agree to that, my kid just doesn't get to spend the night there. You invite your friend to my house. That's what you have to do sometimes. And that is the biggest danger. Yeah, it's really what other families allow and what other kids are comfortable with. I definitely prefer to have my kids have their friends over to my house. And if I haven't met the parents, my child doesn't go there for a few hours, let alone for overnight. I had to do that in high school. My daughter was so embarrassed. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know these parents, and no, you can't go over there for 4 hours. I said, I'm going to have to come in and talk and introduce myself, and that's what I did. And I don't even think I apologized for it, because I don't think it's something to apologize for. So other questions? I did want to leave time for questions. Questions, thoughts?
Can we go back to 1985?
Amen. I know. I think about that sometimes. I think about how much time I spent outside as a kid, hours and hours. I climbed trees. I caught crayfish and salamanders. I caught butterflies. I did a lot of weeding and gardening for my mom. And, we did outdoor activities together. I mean, it wasn't one person's job, it was a family's job to take care of the yard. And my dad would cut the grass and we'd rake it, and my mom would spread it in the garden to thwart the weeds. It was a team effort. And I think we need more of that again. We really do. I think, too, as families, we can plan other activities with our children. And actively, we're going to have a game night, every other week. And we're going to take turns picking out the games. Now, God knows that means sometimes I've got to suffer through Clue, or even worse, Monopoly. I'd much rather play like an apples to apples or more competitive game. But hey, I mean, you got to let them pick, and you just do it. Some nights we do a creative night, and we're like, bring out the paints. Okay, everybody play. Some nights, I mean, we do movie night, which, yes, it's digital media, but again, it's always superior to enjoy that together as opposed to the kids are watching this in here and adults are watching that in there. I'm a much bigger fan of, finding stuff that we can all enjoy together. And it brings up questions, it brings up opportunities for you all to talk about your values and why you believe what you do, why you do what you do and don't do what you don't do. So that's again the value of being involved and in their media use and in what, as I say, co-viewing, as opposed to here, you do your time and that gives me my time to do my stuff. I know it's hard. But it's lifelong, and I'm like I said. So what's going to happen next week is the focus is really on predators and safety stuff. Okay, privacy, safety, predators, and then the final week is how do you know. How does social media sometimes connect to mental illness? And how do you know when you're seeing signs that your child needs professional help?